Good evening, friends, and welcome back to Don't Cry, You're So Sexy, Aha, the coolest new podcast in town. I am your host, Rad, and it's a beautiful Saturday afternoon, actually. I was supposed to be recording this, well, originally on a Tuesday, and then on a Friday, and then on Saturday, because I recorded this episode yesterday, and this is actually the second time I'm recording it because I was just too angry. Like I was just way too angry at Wattpad, I guess. And I promised myself when I started the podcast that, I mean, not when I started it, but you guys know if you've been listening to the other episodes that in my first episode about passion projects, I decided that I would not re record an episode because, this is my podcast and it's something that I'm doing for myself, and I don't really need to be living up to anybody else's expectations of what the podcast is supposed to be. So yeah, that's when I decided that okay, I'm just not gonna re-record any episode, even if I don't like it a little bit. I'm just gonna go with it because those are my opinions. But I think with this episode, I had used Wattpad for 2 years, and then this was 5 years ago, and I thought that over this period of time my thoughts on Wattpad had evolved and changed and become more nuanced and stuff. But as it turns out, that actually isn't the case. Like I just hadn't properly thought about my stint on Wattpad in the last 5 years, and I mistook time for comprehension, and that's not always the case. So yeah, I took 24 hours off. I was editing the episode, and I realized how angry I sounded, and there was definitely some unresolved trauma there with Wattpad. And if you don't know what Wattpad is, or you're new to the podcast or something, I will get into more of this later. But yeah, I decided to re-record it, and I hope that this is a more educated and a more balanced sort of take, and that you can relate to some of it. Okay, so life update. No real life update, to be honest. I just got vaccinated, and COVID ruined my life so much, and everybody's life, to be honest, that I just made getting vaccinated an entire personality trait. And yeah, I vlogged about it for educational purposes, but I did tell people what it's gonna feel like to get vaccinated and blah blah. And yeah, I just made a whole huge deal out of it, and then I felt like a selfish bitch. But I'm getting over that. It's okay. Uh, Getting vaccinated was part of the reason why I'm recording this episode so late, because I was sick on the days I was supposed to record and edit the episode. So yeah, I am recording this on Saturday instead. I am drinking a nice iced coffee. I'm drinking my oat latte, and this is the first time I'm trying oat milk, and it was kind of expensive given how cheap plant foods are in India, but I think it's worth it because it's really nice and creamy, and it tastes like milk without the weird aftertaste that I get because I'm lactose intolerant. So coffee is nice, and if you hear any clinking sounds in the background, that's probably because I'm drinking the coffee, because it is a hot May afternoon in my city. So yeah. Also, I might burp because coffee does that to my digestive system. So I hope you enjoy. And the final life update is that I watered my plants today. So yeah, that's fun. Also, this is the first time I'm recording an episode in the afternoon, and it might be a little bit noisy outside because I'm right next to my balcony. But if I don't record this right now, this episode will not reach you guys on this weekend. So please bear with me. All right, let's get into the actual episode. So like I said, I'm recording this for the second time, and I just felt like the last one didn't come from the right place. Like the last time I recorded the same episode, it didn't come from the right place because there was just, some complex emotions involved there and everything. And who knew that a fanfiction website would cause such a barrage of complex emotions that I don't know how to decode, I did not think that Wattpad of all things would comprise of an entire therapy session. But yeah, that's how it is. So for those of you who are wondering what Wattpad is, Wattpad was basically like this website or an app on which people from all around the world could write stories, and these stories could be in the forms of books or novellas, or it could be like a short story compilation, or it could be like an anthology, whatever. Like, you could just write stories and people around the world could read them, and this is all for free. And the thing was that obviously no established writers per se were publishing on Wattpad. It was just normal people, like regular amateur writers like you and me, who would use Wattpad as a place, as a platform for their writing, and it would reach more people. So it was just like social media, but instead of putting out posts, you're putting out stories and books and writings and poetry and blah blah blah. So that was Wattpad. In popular culture, I feel like Wattpad was most popular for fan fictions. And for those of you who don't know what fan fiction is, wake up. Fan fiction is basically like when you're in a fandom and then you write spin-offs for the actual books or the actual movies. You create stories with the characters from that franchise. Those stories are not in the franchise, and you're just like using your own imagination to write stories about that same franchise. So it's like that. Yeah, it's basically like, if you think about it, mythology is just fan fiction that people wrote for god, I guess, and godly things, or I don't know, religious figures or whatever. So it's like that. Mythology is also technically fan fiction. Then we have like romances. Wattpad romances are really popular, in popular culture. Like, you would see, or people would make memes about, I woke up from my soft bed on a Tuesday morning at 7 a.m. because my alarm was ringing for school. I tie up my long black hair into a messy bun with my pink scrunchie, and then I slip on my pink fluffy slippers, and then I go down to the kitchen and I pour myself some cereal, and I look outside my window, and there they are, One Direction, and they are here to buy me or some shit. Um, so like, sorry, that's technically fan fiction, but like Wattpad romances were basically just teen romances which were being written by teens and for teens, very democratic. Not really. After, let's not forget After. After was this book which was written by Anna Todd, and Anna Todd was like a writer on Wattpad, and she wrote After, and it was basically like a fan fiction about One Direction, but instead of like actually writing about the band, and instead of being based in the like our reality where One Direction is a man, she just based five characters in the book on the real life personalities of One Direction members. And the main character was Harry Styles, obviously, and his name got changed to Harold when they published the books, apparently. So that was basically what After was. And then it was like a whole trilogy, I think, and then it also went on to become like a movie. So yeah, that was After. And this, like, it went on to get published when I had just joined Wattpad, so like in 2014. That was like, it was pretty big for a Wattpad book to be published back then. But now, like, Wattpad books get published on the regular. And one of them, like another one that I just checked out, like when I was revisiting my old library, was yeah, like apparently The Bad Boys Girl or some shit. Like, oh god, we're gonna talk about this entire like bad boy thing on Wattpad. Okay, don't worry, we will speak about it. But yeah, a lot of books will go on to be published. Then this other book, like the one I mentioned right now, it's also gonna become a movie. So it all started with After. Like, After was the first big breakthrough for like a Wattpad book, right? And then yeah, like then the occasional joke about my mom sold me to One Direction, that's very popular, and it's all about like Wattpad fanfics. And how they have these crazy ass plots, usually revolving around famous bands like 1D or maybe 5 Seconds of Summer or some shit. Like, yeah, that's what Wattpad is in popular culture. And AO3, I think, is also a similar website, but I think it's more about fanfiction than like just regular Wattpad romances. I could be wrong about this, but I haven't really used AO3, so there you go. So when I used to use Wattpad, I was more into like the romance part of Wattpad, but I did get into Wattpad because of fan fiction, and I will talk more about this later. But yeah, now Wattpad is more like, I think what's more popular is like BTS and BTS fan fiction. But back in my day, that was not the case, and it was more about like, One Direction fan fiction, or just like, bad boy romances. Now all the bad boy romances have been published in the real world, so that's gonna be causing some trauma in some people. But we'll talk about that. It's okay. So I asked you guys on the Instagram, like, when did you use Wattpad, if you used Wattpad at all? And I think most of us used Wattpad around the same time, which was 2014, 2015. So this was like, middle school, going in high school, that time of our school lives. Again, like very, very interesting period. We're all going through puberty. We are not in our prime. But we're also really curious about, just like the world and our bodies and other people's bodies, especially. It, like I said, it's an interesting time, and I just don't think that period of time is really great for you to be reading Wattpad books. But Wattpad is targeted towards teenagers, so that's kind of like, yes, like I said, this is just the introduction. We will talk about this a lot in this episode, right? Yeah, like I said, I got into Wattpad because of Hermione. And if you don't know what Hermione is basically like the ship name for Draco and Hermione. Draco and Hermione are obviously characters in the Harry Potter books, and I was obsessed with Harry Potter back in like 2013, 2014, and that's also around the time when I started reading Wattpad. So I just got into Wattpad because I had read and consumed and seen everything there was, about the Harry Potter universe that existed. So I had just consumed all of that, and I wanted more. And the natural, like, way out that I had was to download like a book reading app, very innocent. Like, I just did that, and I looked up Harry Potter on it, and the first thing that came up was a Hermione fan fiction. So I started reading it, and like halfway through, I'm kind of like, okay, I'm enjoying it. It's a very unrealistic scenario where Hermione and Draco are head boy and head girl. After the Battle of Hogwarts, they've come back to school, and the head boy and head girl, and they live in the same quarters, and they have to share a bed, which, now that I think about it, was really, really unrealistic. And yeah, but that's the whole premise of fan fiction. It is really unrealistic, but it just gives the readers what they want. Like, the Harry Potter series famously do not have any, like, how do I say this to keep it PG-13? No physical intimacy, like, no like mentions of that, even though it's a franchise about teenagers. Yeah, no mention of that. So people sort of just like fill in the gaps by themselves, and sometimes they go overboard in filling the gaps, and then they create like, these ships. And I'm not gonna lie, like, they are pretty cool ships. Like, I personally really enjoyed Draco and Harry. Like, I liked Harry a lot, I used to. And yeah, like, that's a thing that exists on Wattpad. So yeah, that's how I got into Wattpad, because of Hermione. And I thought it was pretty realistic up until the point when Hermione banged, and then I was like, wait, this seems, something is off, this can't be real. And I can't believe that it was at that point that I was like, okay, maybe this isn't actually the Harry Potter book, like a real Harry Potter book. But yeah, I was dumb, guys, I'm sorry. And yeah, like, ever since then there was no going back, even though I knew that this is not actually Harry Potter, and blah blah blah. I started exploring more, read like a lot of Hermione fan fictions. There was like a Fred and Hermione fan fiction as well, which was like kind of like Hermione Loki slapped, okay, like that ship slapped, kind of, not gonna lie. It's just like Drarry slapped. Oh god, like Volstar is Sirius Black, and what's his surname, Remus Lupin. Yeah, that ship also banged. Oh my god, so much. Like, I loved them. So yeah, sorry, went a little off topic there, but that's how I got into Wattpad. So I think, like, being a teenager on Wattpad, like, I asked you guys on my Instagram, like, just tell me some stories about your time on Wattpad, and your experiences, what you enjoyed, what you didn't enjoy. And the one thing that came up was obviously After, and how obsessed some people were with After. And yeah, the second thing was that why would we join Wattpad? It was basically because, like, around that age, like your early teenage years, you are very explorative, but your parents didn't want you to be reading like romance novels consistently, and they just wanted to keep like a check on what you're reading and what you're consuming, especially on like the more, romantic side of things. So, yeah, that's why Wattpad comes in, because it's like an app and you can read anything for free. So, that's why Wattpad was kind of so popular, because it was like a hidden, forbidden, like, pleasure that people had. So, yeah, that was also the case for me. And I thought that it was a very stupid rule that I couldn't read, real romance novels. But I now see where, my parents were coming from when they tried to make that a thing. And I will talk more about that later as well. But yeah, like, there is a good reason why your parents don't want you to be consuming, like, romance stories written by teenagers for teenagers on the internet. But yeah, that's mainly why I started reading Wattpad, and that's how I just got into the entire universe for 2 years and was absolutely obsessed with it. Now I'm gonna do the thing where I take you guys through my actual Wattpad library. So that was the original premise for the episode, that I was just gonna download the app and then just go through my library and sort of just live react to what I saw in my library. But I tried doing that yesterday, and first of all, I was just so astounded by the kind of shit I used to read, and also it just sort of brought back a lot of memories all of a sudden when I was going through my library, and they were not all good memories, and I could really see how the content on Wattpad has affected me still. And yeah, like I was just, like I said, it was a very angry episode, and it wasn't where I wanted to come from while making an episode on this podcast. So I had a think about it. I did some contemplations, and yeah, here I am. So let's go through my library. Okay, I'm just gonna read out some of the titles of these books, and I'm gonna describe the covers to you, so you sort of get an idea of what we're dealing with here. First, we have The Bad Boys Girl. The Bad Boys Girl, really, really famous book. It was like read by millions of people and got published. It's also being turned into a movie now. Then, When Trouble Meets Trouble, it ends up pretty well. That's an actual name. Then we have Spitfire in Love. Then we have The Bad Boy Stole My Bra. This is also a book that I really liked. Not gonna lie, yeah, this was like a big favorite for me. Then we have holy shit, What Brings Us Together, and this is like a Hermione fanfiction. So I'm gonna describe the cover to you guys. It's the it's a photo of a baby, okay, and that's like superimposed on the entire cover. It's just a baby, and then there's a badly cropped photo of first year Hermione, like Emma Watson, and she's like 11 years old probably in this photo. So she is on the left cheek of the baby, and then there's like a 17-year-old Tom Felton as Draco Malfoy on the right cheek of the baby, and he's like pointing a wand angrily at the camera in this photo. And these two photos have been badly cropped and pasted on either cheek of the baby, and then the title What Brings Us Together is written in bad cursive, so you can imagine what I'm talking about. Now, what's interesting about this book, as I remember it, is that it's, how do I say this without sounding absolutely unrealistic? So you know how J.K. Rowling came out with The Cursed Child a few years ago, in which basically it was like a play, and it was like it was based, I think, 10 or 20 years down the line after the series ends. So what happened in The Cursed Child was that Bellatrix Lestrange and Voldemort have a child together because they want to continue the Riddle bloodline or whatever, and they have a child, and that child is orphaned after the war, and then this child is adopted by Cedric Diggory's father, and blah blah blah. Okay, that's what happens in the Cursed Child, and that's exactly what happens in this fan fiction. Okay, and this fan fiction was written in 2014, or probably even earlier, because it was there when I joined Wattpad in 2014. So I'm gonna go on Google and I'm gonna see when The Cursed Child was published. Cursed Child play, and this was published, wait for it, in 2016, 2 years after this fanfiction. So I am not lying to you. I genuinely think that JKR decided that it would be a good idea, because everybody agrees in the Harry Potter fandom that The Cursed Child is absolutely shit, and we should not regard it as a part of the HP franchise, and we should just all forget about it and think of it as some shitty piece of fanfiction. And here's the thing, I do think that JKR stole the idea for the story from this very fanfiction, okay? In this fanfiction, Hermione and Draco have to bring up the same child together instead of Amos Diggory's father, okay? So it's basically cursed child, but like more forbidden romance types. So yeah, that's what happens. And now we all know that JKR is a fucking turf and we all hate her and everything. Here's one more reason to hate her. She stole a small writer's story, okay? She stole that story and then she published it as her own in a fucking play, which was even worse than the fanfiction somehow. Anyway, yeah, let's go further down in my library. I sold myself to the devil for vinyls. Pitiful, I know. This is a title of a book. Okay, then we have The Replacement Girlfriend. So you know how that fucking movie, which one is it? Sandra Bullock and Ryan Reynolds. Yeah, I forgot the name of the movie. But The Proposal, yeah, The Proposal. So those kinds of plots, like fake girlfriend plots, they were all really popular. And then we have all the boys have loved before kind of plots where you become somebody's replacement girlfriend to make the other person jealous, and then you end up falling in love and blah blah. Those were really popular storylines on Wattpad. Then we have Kidnap My Heart, Bad Boy Kisses, Becoming Popular, Mr. Popular and I, The Last Virgin Standing. It all started with an apple, which you would think is a story about gravity, but it's yet another Wattpad romance. Then we have The Bad Boy Taught Me to Fight, Being the Player's Neighbor. Amazing. This bad boy I'm with. Then we have Falling for the Opposite. I just cannot. I'm just going to go into my archive also and see. My Bad Boy. I almost killed my crush's mom. The Bad Boy and Me. I swear to fucking God, like at least 50,000 books on this website are called Mr. Bad Boy and Me or something like that. Hero by day, your average nerd by night. Then we have, let's see, what do we have? Social Climbers. The Not So Nerd Girl. I cannot. Waist deep in Walmart. The Shy Girl Has a Gun. Seriously. Becoming Popular once again. So many Becoming Popular books, to be honest. The Bad Boy, The Sat Nav, and Me. British guys aren't that cute. His Delivery Chick. Bad Boy Isn't My Type. Another Bad Boy Isn't My Type. Trapped with an Attractive Badass. The Teddy Bear Agreement. Not His Girl. My Girl. The Bad Boy Cupid and Me. The Bad Boy Calls Me Kitten. The Bad Boy's Choice. What actually happened at the Yule Ball? And this is a Fred and Hermione fanfiction. I'll Fight for You. Never Give Up. A Loving Rose. I cannot. A Man Can Change. Yeah, I think A Man Can Change is also a very unfortunate Hermione fanfiction. So, there's that. It's time to address the elephant in the room, guys. Okay. And the elephant in the room is that how repetitive these book titles are, and specifically with the repetition of just this one word, quote unquote, bad boy. Okay. Bad boy stories were really, really popular on Wattpad. And when you think of bad boy, what this means, think of like Heath Ledger in 10 Things I Hate About You, or maybe think of Chuck Bass from Gossip Girl, or maybe even think of like Damon from The Vampire Diaries. So that's the kind of character that I'm talking about when I say the word bad boy. In After, the main character who was based after Harry Styles was also like a bad boy character, and that's why it was also hugely popular, and that was one of the first sort of bad boy based books that got really famous, I guess. So maybe you could say that After started it all. So yeah, and these bad boys were almost always named like either Tyler or Ryder or Flynn or Alec or maybe James, unless they're obviously based after One Direction characters, which was a different scenario altogether. And the story with these bad boys would be that, this would be like the new kid in town, and he was like kind of really reserved and, just joined the high school and stuff. And then some person tried to bully him or pick on him, and then he would like punch a wall or punch a log, or even better, punch the actual bully himself. And then, he would get that, whole bad boy like persona attached to him, and he would always be wearing a leather jacket and had like slicked back hair and everything. So that's the kind of look that they kind of try to give all the bad boys. And they obviously had anger issues and would spend every other day in detention. So that's something that was really popular, and a lot of girls would be attracted to this whole like bad boy thing on the app that was Wattpad. So yeah, and attached to these bad boys would almost always be a good girl. And this good girl was, she was like typically a nerd, and she must have usually been friends with the high school like popular girl. And then they stopped being friends, and she had like the token gay best friend or something, or she had like the token younger sibling who was kind of also an emotional support character for her. And then like a strained relationship with one of her parents probably. And then quirky girls, like this nerd girl would also be really quirky, okay, because like everybody in the school hated her for some reason, although like the way she would be written in the books, she was like absolutely likable, conventionally attractive, and no reason why anybody would like dislike her in my opinion. But she was disliked for the sake of the plot. And yeah, like she would probably be called like either Zoe, or she would be called Chloe, or she would be called Summer, or she would be called Avery, or she would be called Riley. So these were the names that were really popular for quirky nerd girls. And she would listen to music like My Chemical Romance and All Time Low. And she would hate Taylor Swift, and she would love making misogynistic Taylor Swift jokes. The not like other girls basic girl, like that was usually the main character in these stories. And yeah, so the typical story in a Wattpad romance would be that boy meets girl, boy annoys girl, and they sort of like start to hate each other. But then boy fights for girl in like a certain situation, and maybe he speaks up to her bullies or something, and then they started liking each other. And then they have fun for a while, but then the boy finds out a secret that the girl is keeping from him, and they have a huge fight. And then they stop talking for a while, but then they get stuck in a situation together. They probably have to like babysit somebody, or like they're stuck in the school and the school is locked, or I don't know, they're stuck somewhere together. The girl confesses her feelings, or the boy confesses his feelings, and they patch up, and then they kiss, and that's the end of the book, right? The specifics in each book would be different depending on what they wanted to base the plot on, but this would be like the fundamental outline for all of these quirky Wattpad romances. And I think it's worth mentioning here that these stories and the people in these stories were almost always based on like suburban white America. Yeah, and the characters would almost always be white, and they would almost always be straight. I rarely read any queer stories on Wattpad unless they were in fan fiction and ultimately kind of fetishized as well. So yeah, I rarely read any queer stories, and most of these really popular ones that went on to be published were straight white stories, I guess. Yeah, Wattpad was so whitewashed, and there was so much queer erasure that like now 5 years later, Wattpad actually has like a category called diverse literature, and that's where they have all like the stories about, I'm assuming, like people of color and non-straight people, I guess. So that, but like back in the day when I used to use Wattpad, it was very very like very monolithic sort of stories, and like I said, the plot was very similar and the characters are very similar. And yeah, also sorry for having like this random thought in the middle of everything, but Sky was also a very popular name for people in Wattpad stories. Okay, so yeah, these stories were basically like based on teens, and the writers were teenagers themselves, and the readers, like I said, were obviously like teenagers. So it was all supposed to be really relatable, because he was supposed to relate to the struggles of bullying, and he was supposed to like relate to the struggles of how teenagers and people in their adolescence are not exactly comfortable in their own bodies and stuff. So, it was supposed to be like a relatable struggle and everything if you were reading like a Wattpad book about these teenagers. But, now we all know, I mean, I guess everybody's always known all along that teenagers have undeveloped brains, okay? And their brains are not fully formed. So, when you're a struggling teenager and you go on a Wattpad book, and you're struggling with teen problems, and this character in the book is also struggling with teen problems, and the writer of this book is also probably struggling with teen problems. Teens are not exactly that well equipped to be giving advice to each other on how to successfully solve each other's problems. So as a teenager looking to solve their problems, and you go to another teenager for advice, that's I really do not advise that. And that's exactly that was happening. And the one singular solution to all the problems in the world that these fucking books would have was, find a boy. And if you found a boy and you had like this, romance with them, all your problems would be solved, and suddenly you would start loving your body, and your relationship with your mom would be fixed and all that. So like things like that. So you get what I mean. Just finding a boy was the the solution to everything. And to give more context here, I also want to talk about this feature on Wattpad books, which was called the cast. Okay, you could cast real life actors or models or celebrities or whatever as characters in your book. And what I mean by this is, it was basically like supposed to aid the reader's imagination. So if you're describing somebody, a character, then to picture that character in your head, you could picture like the main character as Lily Collins, and then the protagonist's love interest, the male love interest, could be like Francisco Lachowski, who was like this huge model. He probably still is. Or Lucky Blue Smith, who was another supermodel, really popular at that time. So, people would cast these very conventionally attractive, mostly white people in their stories. And, these 20 something people were cast as like teenagers. And as we all know, teenagers actually do not look that perfect, and they do not look that conventionally attractive. But, that's what was going on Wattpad at the time. So, it's in this sort of backdrop, and it's with this conventionally attractive cast that teenagers are trying to grapple with their very real problems. And then you have that sort of expectation. Okay, I'm gonna talk about this. Like, just give me 5 minutes. I'm gonna get to it. Sorry guys, I get really angry when I'm talking about Wattpad, and I have to remind myself that we are at the end of the day talking about literal children who are writing these books and reading these books. So my unresolved trauma about Wattpad should not get in the way. So okay, let's talk about, like I said, in the context of this cast, the fact that teenagers who are writing are basically trying to talk about their real world problems. Okay, I really believe that, like, if you're writing, I think you're writing to, not for other people, but I think you write intrinsically because you need to, and maybe you're trying to grapple with something, or just trying to like navigate through some emotions, or wherever you are in life, whatever it is. I think like at the end of the day, you do write for yourself. But the thing about Wattpad is that you're writing for other people. Like, that's the entire point of this app, is that other people are going to see your work, and so in a way it has to appeal to, or it has to fit into the standards of what's already out there and what's popular on Wattpad, right? So back in the day, back in like fucking 2013, 2014, it was, stories about conventionally attractive people who were struggling with problems that they probably would not have to struggle with. For example, body issues and like body image issues. Like, I say this because the people who were being casted in these books were literally models. Okay, they were 20 or more years old, and they were literally models. So a model is somebody who is considered extremely conventionally attractive. And I feel like if a model were to face body issues, they would face them in a very different way than in which a teenager faces body issues. Like, I think they're two completely, sorry for the noise in the background, but they're two completely different ball games altogether. Yeah, this model is being cast as a teenager who is supposed to have braces and acne and shit, okay? Teenagers are supposed to have braces and acne and shit. But this fucking model doesn't, right? What I'm trying to say here is that most people who are reading these books or writing these books don't actually look like the cast of the books themselves. Like, like even in the real world, like most people do not look tall, white, slim. That's just like statistically, most people are not, their bodies are not like that. But that's the ideal that is shown in these books. And like I said, people writing the books don't look like them, the people reading the books don't look like them. And because you're reading and writing, like I think you're writing to sort of deal with your own emotions and deal with your shit, and you're reading maybe to, as a teenager, like I mentioned earlier on in the podcast, to sort of escape and learn new things and learn more about, like bodies and other people's bodies, and just learn more about romance, and maybe try to escape from the shit teens go through as teens, i.e., bullying and stuff like that. And the thing is that you can't write about these things, the way you want to, in like their absolute truest form, in a very honest way. You can't write about them because they don't fit into, the limits or the idea of what's popular on Wattpad or what people actually want to read, right? And so you have to sort of fit your story, and you have to like fit your whatever you're dealing with into the mold of a conventional, Wattpad, like I mentioned, like the the typical plot line. And there is nothing romantic about, there's nothing beautiful, or there's nothing I feel to be romanticized about what you're going through as a teenager. Like, bullying cannot be romanticized, body issues should not be romanticized, like full stop, right? And you're kind of forced to do that when you're writing about this shit on Wattpad. If you're not supposed to romanticize it, you're at least supposed to fit into like this narrative, and you're supposed to find like a romantic solution for it, almost like the protagonist, the very conventionally beautiful protagonist of the story, does not like her body, and then she meets a boy, and then she starts liking her body. So what does that tell you at the end of the day? Like, you're not finding any real solutions to your problems. The real solution would probably be therapy, but that's not what the hundreds million teenagers that are reading your books want to know. And they can't know that in the first place, because I feel like you as a teenager also probably do not know that, do not know any proper answers to your problems, because your brain is underdeveloped. That's really it. Like, you can't know all of these things, and you're trying to find the answer for these very complex problems. Let's face it, like teenagers and adolescents go through pretty complex things which shape them for the rest of their lives, and you can't find the answers to these problems within a plot or a framework that was not designed to solve them. You would say that, like, I did personally find the idea that teenagers out there in the world were writing these stories, and I really did find that nice, and I found that relatable, that somebody else out there in the world is a teenager and they're writing something that's popular and that apparently other people can resonate with, or just something that they find some sort of escape in, and that's nice. But at the end of the day, there is nothing, in my opinion, empowering about a teenager writing a story that is not fully theirs and that does not actually deal with the problems that they are dealing with. It's like, how how John Green and other male authors write about like female teenagers who are like all quirky and shit, and how they like it's very, again, like a very popular meme, how male authors will describe female bodies. Yeah, it's like that. I feel like it's like you're writing about the female body, or you're writing about teenage bodies while trying to emulate fucking John Green while doing it. And as we all know, he does not give the most accurate description of the female teenage experience. So yeah, like you're trying to explain what you as a teenager are going through using the framework that John Green and other famous YA writers have set out for you, and they are not always the most accurate and the most realistic, tools for you to navigate through your own experience. But that's what you have, and then that's what you use to write, and that's what other teenagers out there are reading. Like, I don't know if this makes a lot of sense, but I think after thinking about this for like 24 hours, and I thought about it in the shower, I thought that I had this epiphany. It could be completely dumb, but that's what I think you have to do as a teenager. And yeah, teenagers writing unrealistic teen stories does not empower anybody, I think. And this could be an unpopular opinion, and I might get cancelled for it, but for now, I will put aside my fear of being cancelled and just put it out there. Like, teens are not supposed to be, experienced enough to find the fucking love of your life. And then this fucking Wattpad book is telling you that finding the love of your life through like an adventure is going to be the only solution to all of your problems. So, what kind of a message does that put out there? And then let's get into like, wow, this is gonna be another big rabbit hole. But the way that relationships are depicted on Wattpad, especially in relation with this whole this whole bad boy phenomenon, is that, teenagers are writing about romance and relationships, and at 15, you have not been in a proper long term relationship because, first of all, it's illegal, and second of all, you're literally 15. So I don't know, like, unless you started, yeah, it's just completely illegal, and it's just not possible to have been or have experienced healthy boundaries, healthy relationships, healthy communication. Like, you haven't experienced any of that when you're 15. So, whatever idea you get from, like, YA novels or like movies and shit, you try to put that out there. And let's face it, until a few years ago, we did not have very positive portrayals of relationships in the media, or just the female experience in the media. And yeah, so this whole bad boy phenomena would be like, jealousy being seen as a very, romantic and a very sexy trait in a guy. And then, like, absolutely no fucking consent, like, no boundaries between the two characters, and the bad boy does whatever the fuck he wants, and, he's really violent and abusive, in an emotional sense. Sometimes also in a physical sense. I'm not gonna elaborate on that because I have deleted that from my memory, and also this is not going to be that kind of conversation here. I'm just saying that, yeah, like, you sort of make that idea of a bad boy really sexy, and like, and now I think on the internet and in popular culture, we recognize fuckboys and players for what they actually are. But back in the day, they were romanticized as hell, and this idea that you could change a fuckboy, or like you could change the player, and you could be his personal therapist and all of that. And I'm really happy that that kind of narrative is, maybe it is still popular in some parts of the internet, but from what I've seen, people recognize that it's not their job to change a man and to be his therapist, basically. So yeah, very, very toxic portrayals of relationships, and this whole like bad boy thing, a toxic relationship being shown as the solution to your body issues or your relationship with your parents. That's not how shit works. And even though that's the simplistic plotline that Wattpad books, find easiest to follow, that really isn't how the world works. And chances are that it's going to fuck you up even more than what you're already going through as a teenager. And I know for sure that I did start to idealize this whole, like, I say this with a lot of regret, and I'm very embarrassed to admit this, but yeah, like idolizing the entire like passionate bad boy who has mental health issues. You don't know that he has mental health issues because the word anxiety or depression would not be mentioned in these Wattpad books at all. They would just romanticize the shit out of like anger management issues and shitty mental health and blah blah blah. And you would be depressed together, and you would be each other's cure or whatever. And that kind of narrative was really, really popular, and I would also start to look for that as a fucking teenager who was 14 or 15. And yeah, dude, you should not be doing that. Like, please, 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 like, if you're a teenager, just finding a boy and trying to be in a relationship with a boy is not the answer when you are a minor. Or when you like that, it may be I don't know, I don't even want to judge, like, because yeah, at the end of the day, like I said, these are teenagers we're talking about, and I don't want to pass judgments on what is or isn't right for you. But like, personally, I really do think that teenagers should be exploring their own selves and their own hobbies and interests. And a relationship with a guy is rarely ever the solution in real life. Like, it is the solution in movies like Sex and the City and like Eat, Pray, Love and shit, but it's just not the solution in real life. Therapy is most often the answer, like I have mentioned repeatedly on this podcast. But boys, no, boys are not the answer to your issues in life. So remember that. If you're a teenager who's listening to this, first of all, why the heck are you listening to this? Like, please, this is not the content you should be listening to. But yeah, like, if you are listening to this by chance, just don't like think that another teenager can solve your problems through a book they're writing to grapple with their own problems. Okay, that's how it is, to put it simply. Yeah, I just remembered this analogy I was going to mention earlier, right? So you know how out of these TikTok dances, which are really popular these days, they essentially like focus on parts of the body, parts of the female body that have been traditionally seen as attractive, from the male gaze. Like, I'm gonna keep this PG-13 when I say like the area below your neck and above your stomach, and the area below your waist and above your thighs. Those are the parts of the body that are really highlighted in these dances. And then, women perform these dances, and I love to see them on on TikTok, or in my case, Reels. But like, if we say that these TikTok dances and like people are doing them and it's like female empowerment, but how is it female empowerment in its truest sense if by doing this dance and performing, like, at the end of the day, we are looking for validation from the male gaze because these dances were catered to be attractive to the male gaze. So it's like that. Like, how are you supposed to write a book on Wattpad by catering to the, like, conventionally attractive sort of, fairy tale fantasy? And like, how are you supposed to find the problems to like real teenage issues by catering to something that's not like in its purview at all, and it's like something that's completely different from, I don't know where I'm coming from on this. Like, still many thoughts to be developed on this topic, but I think that it's just not empowering in the way that we try to say that, okay, teenagers owning their narratives on Wattpad, but are they really properly owning their narratives if they can't even write about their own true selves, and they are forced to write about conventional bodies and conventional stories and conventional plots, because that's what sells the most on Wattpad, and that's what gets published the most, because that's, I think, what Wattpad has become. Like, I was just going through my library, and all of these kind of bad boy books have now been published, and they are no longer on Wattpad because of like legal purposes and all that, and they are now out there in the world. I'm assuming even reaching like an even larger audience. So yeah, now it's out there in the world, and I know that I was traumatized by it in my teenage years, so I just hope that other teenagers are not being traumatized by it. And that's what I'm saying. Like, I mentioned in the beginning that now I get where my parents were coming from when they didn't want me to read all these romances as a teenager, because my brain was literally underdeveloped, like, like, and then pumping it full of fairy tale romances is just not the way to go, especially when they give such unrealistic and toxic portrayals of love and relationships and intimacy, and people of my ethnicity would just be like a token character even if they were mentioned in these books at all, because like I said, it was just like Wattpad was just an exposure into suburban white America when I was reading it. And that's all I found out about. Like, people say that Wattpad, yeah, is like exposes you to how things are around the world, but it's really just exposing you to like I said, suburban America. So that's another thing. So yeah, like, I get where my parents were coming from when they wanted me to focus on other things instead of like this whole deal. And I wish I had read more regular books. And that's the weird thing, right? That right after my Wattpad phase was over, I got into like an intensely feminist phase of my life. I read the vagina monologues. I did my research on like first, second and third wave feminism. I was a very raging feminist at that point in my life, and I started listening to Sleater Kinney and like, what was that band which had Rebel Girl, I don't know, all of these like feminist bands and blah blah. which I think was like, I don't know, my mind's reaction to having consumed like 2 straight years of fucking stupid misogynistic wattpad fiction. But yeah, that's where my brain went automatically. And not gonna lie, I was kind of a liberal after I read wattpad, but things are better now, I can say for that for sure. But yeah, that's this whole like post wattpad phase is the subject for another episode altogether, so maybe I will talk about it sometime later. But yeah, that's my thing with wattpad. And yeah, like, my best takeaway would be that if you used wattpad, maybe you have some trauma to deal with, okay? Maybe you have some therapy sessions to go to. And yeah, like, I think that's like the takeaway from every single one of my episodes, that all of us need therapy. But yeah, like, that's my takeaway. And I just feel like at the end of the day, I should not be too hard on my teenage self, because frankly, she did not know better. And that's why I'm just saying that if you have any teenagers in your life, then just be there for them, because they really are your formative years, and they really do make you who you are. And you have a lot of unlearning to do from your teenage years, which can be avoided altogether if you actually do learn the right things as a teenager, I feel. So yeah, if there are any teenagers in your life, just check in on them. And yeah, make sure they're not fucking reading some bad boy bullshit on Wattpad. So yeah, that's my time, folks. That sounded like the ending of a stand-up set, sorry. Yeah, thank you for coming to my TED Talk, I guess. Just have a lot of feelings on this topic, and I feel like I could talk about it for another hour, but that's what I'm gonna put out into the world today. Hopefully I will be able to edit this in time to release it on Sunday, but you never know. Thank you for listening. Thank you for giving your time to my unformed opinions on Wattpad and other related bullshit. But yeah, you guys make my day. Listening to your thoughts and opinions makes my day. Reading your messages, that is my jam. Okay. Yeah, stay safe out there, folks. Y'all be safe out there. So no, just I need to shut up anyway. Yeah, my body is crashing, I think, after that full otla day I had. So I'm just gonna, I don't know, watch some TV now and play with my dog. Give your pet a hug from my side. Give yourself a hug from my side. And I don't know how you'll do that, but anyway, yeah, I'm definitely crashing. Sorry. I love you all. Probably saying this for the 30th time. But yeah, I do really love you all, and you guys are the best, and you're the best audience I could ever ask for. And you rock, and you deserve the best. And take care of your families, and take care of yourselves. And yeah, good night.